For decades, the royal family guarded Prince Philip's legacy with reverence until now. When Prince William revealed a confidential family truth, the echoes could be felt through every palace hallway. Why did Prince Philip choose Prince George and only George for a medal that defined a generation? And why was the rest of the family completely blindsided? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The House of Windsor, a fortress of polished appearances and carefully orchestrated tradition, had been rattling beneath the surface for months. Behind palace walls, the whispers had grown into murmurs about succession, about shifting loyalties, and about a legacy slowly slipping into uncertainty. With King Charles struggling to maintain unity in a monarchy increasingly at odds with itself, the internal power dynamics were more volatile than ever. Each glance at a state dinner, each subtle pause in a public speech, carried the weight of unspoken tension. And within that precarious environment, an unassuming envelope delivered quietly, wrapped in aged parchment, would threaten to unravel it all. The envelope was unlike any other, aged but pristine, bearing Prince Philip's unmistakable cursive, sharp, deliberate and confident, addressed directly to William and marked personal. To be opened in time, it arrived through a trusted aide days before the first whispers of an official announcement. William didn't open it at once. He couldn't. The weight of the moment, the possible implications, held him back. For nearly a week it sat untouched in a locked drawer in his Kensington office. But as tension with his father simmered beneath the surface, particularly around matters of George's early training and symbolic public appearances, William knew it was time. What lay inside wasn't just personal. It was seismic. The letter was short but potent, a declaration, not a suggestion. Prince Philip had named George, not William, not Charles, as the sole recipient of a deeply personal medal, one that hadn't been seen in public since the early days of Philip's service. The medal, rarely discussed even within the family, wasn't just an object. It was a message, a signal, a torch passed not through protocol but through belief. George, at just 12, had been chosen as the bearer of something far heavier than gold. Within hours of opening the letter, William found himself at odds with his father. Charles, blindsided, viewed the gesture as an affront to the hierarchy he was desperately trying to stabilize. To bypass him entirely, even in symbolic gesture, reeked of distrust. William, in contrast, saw it as a generational promise, a moment where legacy broke free from rigidity. But he hesitated, not out of doubt, but out of strategy. The timing was fragile. The family was fractured. Catherine urged caution while Anne remained uncharacteristically silent. But it was what William said next that cracked the royal facade and turned quiet curiosity into family-wide chaos. When William finally spoke the words aloud, the room fell into a stunned silence. He said it was always George. The medal wasn't meant for Charles. Not even for William, it was a torch meant to skip a generation. And behind that choice lay secrets the family never wanted to face. For a brief moment, no one moved. The weight of those words didn't just hang in the air, they pierced it. William's voice, steady but heavy, echoed through the chamber like a pronouncement that none could have anticipated. Those who had gathered, those who assumed they knew the rhythm of legacy and lineage, suddenly realized they had misread everything. Prince Philip's words, preserved in deliberate ink and passed through his grandson, had disrupted the natural order of succession in a way that felt both strategic and intimate. The message was clear. George, young and untested, had already been chosen in Philip's mind as the future. As William recounted the letter in full, the impact deepened. There was no ambiguity, no vague suggestions or cryptic references. Philip had been explicit. He believed George possessed a spark that could not be ignored. It was always him, William repeated, not out of defiance but disbelief. He spoke of a moment long ago, an afternoon Philip had spent alone with George in the gardens of Balmoral. Something about that conversation, something unspoken and deep, had imprinted itself onto Philip's mind. From that point on, the decision had been made, not because of tradition, not because of title, but because of instinct. Charles sat motionless. The silence wasn't of composure, it was stunned grief, laced with betrayal. His own father, the man he had spent a lifetime trying to please, had looked past him in his final reckoning. For Charles, this wasn't about the medal, it was about what it represented, that even in death, Philip had chosen distance over recognition. He clenched his hands beneath the table, swallowing a storm that threatened to break loose. When he finally spoke, it wasn't anger that surfaced, it was a quiet, cutting hurt. He doubted me until the very end. But the silence was quickly broken by Camilla, whose voice, controlled yet icy, cut through the tension like a blade. "And you truly believe it's appropriate to place such a burden on a child?" she asked, locking eyes with William. "This isn't sentiment, it's strategy, or manipulation." Her words were sharp, but her eyes betrayed something deeper: fear. Not of George, but of what this decision meant for the balance of power. Camilla had spent years building her place in the monarchy's new framework, and now, with one letter, it had been quietly undercut. Princess Anne said nothing. She simply stood, her face unreadable, and walked out. Her silence spoke louder than any confrontation could. Prince Edward remained seated, stone-faced, staring at the floor. Both siblings had been blindsided, not just by the decision, but by how deliberately it had been concealed. The family, so often shielded behind tradition and stoicism, now felt exposed, vulnerable, human. And as for William, the revelation had placed him in an impossible position, bound by duty to his father, yet tethered by love and promise to his son. Every word he spoke seemed to stretch the distance between them further. He wasn't trying to assert power, he was honoring a dying man's wish, but that made it no easier to bear. The tension between William and Charles no longer simmered, it burned. And at the center of it all was a boy who had no idea of the storm brewing around his name. But what did the medal really mean? And why had Prince Philip buried its significance so deeply? To most, it was just another royal decoration. But insiders knew the truth. This medal wasn't merely military, it was tied to an oath, a code, and a buried chapter of royal history that began with Philip's darkest mission. Long before he became the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip lived a life shadowed by silence and secrecy. His naval years were marked not only by service, but by assignments shrouded in confidentiality, missions that required him to act not as a prince, but as a protector of something far older than crown and country. The medal in question had never been displayed, never worn in public. It was tucked away, far from ceremonial robes and polished medals of valor. Its existence whispered only through coded family references and vague footnotes in locked archives. And yet, to those who understood its significance, it was a symbol of a pact. Not a reward, but a responsibility, an unspoken covenant with the future of the monarchy. The story of its origin had never been told publicly, but whispers among palace aides and aging courtiers hinted at a mission during Philip's time in the Mediterranean. Something went wrong. Something was covered up. And in that moment of personal sacrifice, the medal was quietly forged, less from metal, more from resolve. It was meant to be passed on not through birthright, but through discernment. It symbolized the soul of duty, detached from politics, anchored in protection. Those chosen to carry it were expected to guard not just the family's image, but its soul. That's why it never appeared in Philip's official records. He had ensured it stayed out of the public will, omitted from royal inventories, and mentioned only once in a confidential note left to the royal archivist. Its absence wasn't forgetfulness, it was deliberate concealment. And yet, behind that secrecy was intent, a torch to be handed only when the time was right. And now, Philip had made his choice. George. The moment between Philip and George at Balmoral had seemed innocent enough. Just a walk, a grandfather and great-grandson, away from the press, nestled in the seclusion of the estate's wild terrain. But hat passed between them during that walk left an impression. George, inquisitive and unguarded, had asked a question that no one had expected from a child his age, and Philip, struck by its depth, saw something in him, something that reminded him of what he had once been. It wasn't about titles or thrones, it was about instinct, about strength that needed no announcement. Catherine had known. Not the full story, but enough. Philip had confided in her months before his death, when George had fallen ill, and Catherine had sat beside Philip during a visit. He had told her that one day she would understand, that George was not just her son, he was the keeper of something older than both of them. Catherine had held on to that cryptic exchange, unsure of its meaning, until William unfolded the letter. Then everything made sense. Her silence wasn't secrecy, it was protection. As the palace scrambled to control the narrative, the one person they hadn't considered was already plotting a bold countermove. Locked away behind heavy doors, Queen Camilla was not calm, she was livid. How could a mere child be chosen over the reigning monarch's closest circle? Her fury wasn't just personal, it was strategic. And soon she would make her displeasure known in the most devastating way. The revelation of Prince Philip's letter had shaken the palace, but in Camilla's private quarters, it sparked an eruption. Rage burned beneath the surface as she paced relentlessly, her fury directed not only at the dead duke but at the living forces threatening the structure she had spent years constructing. Camilla had clawed her way into acceptance, weathering scandal, cold shoulders, and palace whispers. And now, with one letter, it felt as though she were being erased, relegated to a supporting role in a story she believed she helped rewrite. The very idea that Philip would bypass not just Charles but her as well. A woman who had stood at the king's side through reinvention and reign felt like betrayal coated in arrogance. Behind closed doors, Camilla unraveled. Palace aides whispered of shouting matches and tear-streaked warnings. She reportedly called the medal's decision a mockery, questioning whether Philip had been manipulated or worse, dismissive of the current royal order. In a particularly heated exchange, she was overheard referring to George as a sweet boy, but far too soft to carry history. These weren't just remarks of a wounded royal. They were the calculated barbs of a woman preparing to fight back. Camilla understood how the public consumed legacy. She knew the power of narrative, and she intended to reshape it before it slipped from her grasp. Within days, trusted aides were discreetly mobilized. Press briefings were subtly altered. Communications officers were urged to minimize the medal story's significance, to spin it as a sentimental gesture, nothing more. It was an attempt to smother the flame before it ignited. But beneath the surface, a more dangerous conflict simmered. Catherine had not commented publicly, but her silence had volume. Every appearance she made with George was now watched through a sharpened lens. Every smile, every hand on George's shoulder, every carefully chosen word, it all felt choreographed to assert a new order. And Camilla noticed. The two women, once civil, now existed in a strained dance of symbolism and cold precision. Invitations withdrawn, seating arrangements shifted, compliments left unsaid. The palace had entered its quietest Cold War. Camilla turned to Charles in desperation. Her voice was low but urgent as she pleaded behind closed doors. Undo this before it destroys us all. She argued that this decision, if left unchallenged, would signal instability, that the monarchy could not survive another generational divide without clarity of authority. But Charles, emotionally bruised by his father's final slight, offered no clear answer. He stood between two fires, his wife's panic and his son's defiance. His silence, meant to buy time, only deepened the fracture. But someone else wasn't backing down, and his silence would soon explode into royal reckoning. Fathers and sons have clashed throughout history, but rarely like this. King Charles summoned William behind closed doors. What followed wasn't a conversation, it was a collision of legacy, betrayal, and a father's bitter realization. He had been skipped. Again. The tension between king and heir had always been quietly simmering, restrained by duty and the unspoken need for stability. But in the stillness of that private room, everything boiled over. Charles stood with the weight of a crown and the fragility of a son whose father had once again chosen to look elsewhere. His voice trembled, not from weakness but from the slow-burning sting of humiliation. Why now? Why him? Why not me? The words spilled out, decades of buried resentment clinging to every syllable. He wasn't just asking about the medal, he was demanding to know why, in the twilight of his reign, his father's judgment still loomed larger than his own. William didn't flinch. His response was firm, not cruel, but resolute in its clarity. "It wasn't my choice. It was grandfather's." There was no grand defense, no attempt to soothe the wound. William had no intention of softening the truth. For him, this wasn't about defiance. It was about respecting a man's final wish. Yet the silence that followed revealed the true depth of the fracture. This wasn't just about Philip. It was about the lifelong divide between Charles and those who never quite saw him as the king he eventually became. In that moment, the ghosts of old conversations returned. Prince Philip's remarks, once dismissed as generational bluntness, now echoed with devastating precision. He had doubted Charles's decisiveness, questioned his strength, and voiced his unease about the monarchy's future under his leadership. To Charles, those criticisms had once felt like jabs from a hardened father. But now, with the medal bestowed upon George, those jabs felt like a final judgment, not just as a leader, but as a man, as a father, as the bridge between two powerful generations. The confrontation turned sharp. Charles accused William of orchestrating this for his own gain, of using George to overshadow him before his reign had truly solidified. But William pushed back harder. "You want the crown," he said quietly, "but you've never been ready to carry its weight." It wasn't just an accusation, it was an inheritance of frustration passed down through blood. William, who had once stood quietly in his father's shadow, had stepped into a role neither of them could have fully prepared for, the interpreter of Prince Philip's final will. Just as voices began to rise, Catherine entered the room not with force but with silence. She placed a steady hand on William's shoulder, her presence enough to soften the edge of confrontation without a single word. She didn't take sides. She didn't need to. Her calmness filled the room with the only thing it had lacked: perspective. And yet, even in her quietude, there was no mistaking her stance. She had known Philip's intent, she had seen the future forming, and she knew this battle was only beginning. But while the palace spiraled into disarray, one young boy remained blissfully unaware until the medal was placed into his hands. No trumpets, no cameras, just family and a moment that felt bigger than time. When the medal touched Prince George's palm, everything changed. He wasn't just a boy anymore. He was a symbol, and those watching knew it. The decision had been made quietly, away from headlines and public speculation. William and Catherine insisted that the moment remain private, protected from the frenzy they both knew was coming. The weight of what this symbolized demanded discretion. No grand hall, no red carpets, just a drawing room cloaked in history, where whispers meant more than declarations. Only a handful were invited, not by rank but by trust. The message was unspoken. This was not about spectacle. This was about meaning. George, unaware of the full gravity, stood beside his father, trying to make sense of what was unfolding. His young eyes flicked between the faces of the adults around him, searching for clues. William knelt and spoke quietly, carefully. He didn't dramatize. He didn't promise glory. Instead, he told George the truth, that his great-grandfather had left him something rare. Not because he was the eldest or the most powerful, but because he had seen something in him. Something unshaped but strong. George listened. He nodded. But the weight of the moment pressed into him all the same. When the medal was placed in his hand, his fingers curled around it gently, as though it might break beneath his grip. Catherine stood nearby, watching the exchange with tears that refused to fall. Heart swelled with pride, but it was laced with fear. She had always known this day would come, but she hadn't expected it so soon. There was a heaviness to the room, not grief, but legacy, something ancient now resting on the shoulders of someone still learning multiplication tables. Yet even as she stood in silence, her hand resting lightly on her heart, she knew this moment would define everything that came next. For George. For all of them. Across the room, Princess Anne gave the smallest of nods, her lips pressed into a thin line. She hadn't spoken much since the letter's reading, but her presence here, now firm, unsentimental, deeply loyal, was the only gesture needed. It was approval, quiet but absolute, and Prince Edward, ever the silent observer, walked forward at the close of the short ceremony, placing his hand on George's shoulder. He bent forward and whispered something only the boy could hear. George's face didn't change, but he nodded once. Whatever was said would never be repeated. Noticeably absent were King Charles and Queen Camilla. Their silence in the days leading up to the event had grown louder by the hour. There was no statement, no excuse, no explanation, just empty seats where their presence was expected. That absence said more than words ever could. It wasn't just disapproval, it was a fracture laid bare, a refusal to acknowledge a moment they could not control. But the quiet moment didn't stay quiet for long. One palace leak would thrust the story into the global spotlight. A whisper became a wave. Then came the headlines. Prince George named sole heir to Philip's legacy. The press pounced, the public reacted, and royal insiders pointed fingers. Who leaked it and why now? What began as a private moment of legacy quickly spiraled into a full-blown media firestorm. The quiet ceremony, designed to shield George from the pressures of royal expectation, was obliterated the moment a foreign tabloid published an article detailing every intimate element of the event. The medal, the attendees, even the absence of Charles and Camilla. It was all there, too accurate, too fast. Within hours, the story had been picked up globally, and speculation erupted like wildfire. The palace, blindsided and scrambling, realized the narrative had slipped from their hands. Inside the royal walls, chaos took hold. Camilla's closest aide was immediately placed under quiet scrutiny. Her access, her timing, her unexplained communications all became suspicious. She denied involvement, but the damage was done. Leaks this surgical didn't come from curiosity, they came from intent. And while all eyes focused on her, a sudden shift occurred. A second theory emerged. Whispers pointed toward a completely unexpected source, a member of the extended family with long-held resentments and a strategic motive for disruption. Nothing was proven. But in a family this powerful, suggestion alone was enough to fracture loyalties. For George, the storm was instant and unforgiving. One day he was a child carrying a symbolic gesture. The next he was plastered across screens, labeled as the future. He wasn't ready for the headlines, for the invasive questions, for the overanalyzed photos and the politicized commentary. What had been a moment of quiet dignity had become a spotlight too harsh for any child. And yet, the public reaction was something no one expected. While royal purists clung to tradition, a newer, younger generation surged in support of George. To them, he represented more than monarchy, he symbolized reinvention. Untouched, unspoiled, and unafraid to carry something new forward. But not everyone was applauding. Republican critics seized the moment, using the media circus to reignite debates about the monarchy's relevance. They questioned the secrecy, the symbolism, the implications of an unelected institution grooming a child for future power. Protests began popping up near palaces. Op-eds dissected every move. Parliament members were pressed to weigh in. A quiet passing of legacy had evolved into a national conversation about the very soul of the crown. Catherine, watching the storm swell around her son, stepped in not with words, but with precision. Her public appearances became fewer, but more deliberate. Her statements were brief, calming, firm. She orchestrated a protective media bubble, quietly calling on allies in the press to back off. Every image of George now had context. Every headline was watched. She didn't fight the media's attention, she redirected it, crafting a narrative that wrapped her son in strength, not scandal. She knew this wasn't just a moment, it was a test. But while the world argued, one final piece of the puzzle emerged, and it changed everything about Philip's decision. Locked away in a sealed drawer beneath the Windsor archives was one final letter written by Prince Philip to his great-grandson. Its contents weren't just touching, they were transformational. It revealed a side of Philip the public never saw, and a prof the family had tried to forget. The discovery came at the height of the chaos, just as arguments about loyalty, succession, and secrecy threatened to tear the royal household apart. A quiet archivist, following an old instruction card, uncovered the letter and passed it directly to William. No ceremony, no announcement. Just a folded envelope, marked with Philip's unmistakable scrawl and a simple line beneath the seal, "For the boy who will understand later." William hesitated. Not out of fear, but because he knew whatever rested inside would not just clarify the past, it would rewrite it. When he opened it, the words felt almost like a voice reaching across time. Philip wrote with a tone that blended wisdom and warning. He spoke of storms that come without thunder, of institutions that crumble not through rebellion, but through complacency. He confessed that as a boy he had been crushed under expectations he never asked for, that the monarchy had often taken more than it gave. And yet, he believed George could carry that burden differently, not with rigid duty but with quiet conviction. He wrote that true strength was not loud, it endured, it adapted, it protected. Philip shared memories no one had ever heard: lonely nights, exiled roots, an adolescence defined by uncertainty and distrust. He admitted that those scars shaped the man he became. They hardened him, sometimes too much, and that, he feared, was what had driven distance between himself and Charles. He was brutally honest. He acknowledged his failings, his coldness, his impatience. And then he wrote why he chose George. He believed the child had heart where he once had armor, compassion where he carried iron. One passage shook William most. Philip described a dream vivid, persistent, of a future where the monarchy didn't collapse, but transformed. Not through force, through humility. A young king walking N.O.T. ahead of the people, but beside them. Philip admitted he did not know if dreams came from faith, memory, or fear, but he trusted this one. And then came the line that pierced through centuries of royal hierarchy: not all kings wear the crown first. It was not a challenge, it was a correction. A reminder that influence can precede power, and sometimes outlive it. William read the letter aloud to Catherine later that night. His voice broke before the final paragraph. Philip, blunt to the end, wrote that the medal was only a symbol. The real inheritance was resilience. If George learned to listen before ruling, to bend without breaking, the monarchy would survive whatever storms history hurled next. Catherine wept quietly, not out of sorrow, but out of the terrifying clarity now before them. George had not been chosen to shine, he had been chosen to endure. Word of the letter's existence filtered through the family layer by layer, and suddenly the arguments fell silent. Charles didn't receive apology, Camilla didn't receive validation, no one received closure. Instead, they all faced the same unavoidable truth. Philip had already shaped the path long before he left this world. His legacy was not an artifact to debate, it was a direction, and as the monarchy faces an uncertain tomorrow, one boy walks forward with a medal in hand and the weight of destiny on his shoulders. The crown hasn't shifted, but the center of power has. In the wake of Prince Philip's final act of legacy, the royal family faces a new reckoning. What does it mean when a child becomes the lightning rod of the future? Change, in monarchies, rarely announces itself with fanfare. It arrives in silences, in looks exchanged behind drawn curtains, in the subtle reconfiguration of influence. And that is precisely what has happened. The monarchy may wear the same crown, stand behind the same gates, but the air around it feels different. Prince George, once shielded from scrutiny, now stands at the quiet epicenter of a royal recalibration. He is no longer just the heir's heir. He is the symbol of something older being reborn in a new, uncertain age, and the palace knows it. Every step he takes now seems to echo louder than before. King Charles, though deeply wounded by what many consider his father's final judgment, has not publicly contested it. Instead, he has stepped back just slightly, just enough. His silence is not defeat but caution. Behind palace walls he issued only one clear directive: don't let this divide us. A plea, yes, but also a warning. He knows the monarchy cannot survive another rupture, and yet, even as he tries to steady the crown atop his head, there is a quiet acknowledgement that something irreversible has taken root. His son has become the steward of a new kind of legacy, and his grandson now carries the hopes of a man who once bypassed kings to safeguard the future. Camilla, on the other hand, has grown distant. Her once confident stride through court life now feels subdued. Public engagements continue, but the warmth has gone. She does not speak of the medal, she does not mention George. Insiders describe her demeanor as cold, detached. The trusted inner circle she fought to secure has grown smaller. While some whisper she feels betrayed, others believe she is recalculating, watching the shifting tides, and choosing silence over misstep. What's clear is that the matriarchal influence she once wielded is slowly slipping beyond reach. Inside the firm, strategy meetings have taken a sharper tone. Advisors, once focused on William and Charles as the two pillars of continuity, now speak openly about George's long-game preparation. His schooling, public appearances and mentorships are being reviewed and, in some cases, reshaped. Catherine is at the center of this movement, careful, deliberate but undeniably proactive. She is crafting George's presence like a statesman's mother, not just a future queen. And William, caught between legacy and inheritance, is walking a line few could balance. But he's doing it for George, and perhaps deep down for Philip. The public has responded with a curious blend of reverence and worry. Some see George as a unifying force, a boy blessed with clarity in a time of chaos. Others worry that too much weight has been placed on someone so young. But in both admiration and concern, one truth is emerging: George is no longer just growing up. He is growing into something, a symbol, a statement, a possibility. And that is where the monarchy finds itself today, suspended between what was and what might be, tethered to the image of a boy who never asked for this, but now carries it with grace. And so, as the sun sets on the last remnants of the old order, the final image is not of thrones or crowns, but of George Medal pinned firmly to his chest, walking beside his parents into a future that none of them chose, but all of them now own. In a family ruled by tradition, one man's final wish may have redrawn the lines of power forever. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.